There's a delicate balance here, and it's for you as an individual to know what that is.
You are listening to Healing Broken Trust podcast with Brad and Morgan Robinson. Episode 1 is all about the 7 stages of the recovery process. But before you listen any further, go to healingbrokentrust.com/episode 1, that's episode and the number 1, and download the tools that we've created to help you through this process. What you'll find really are helpful tools to start implementing what we're talking about right away. So make sure to go to healingbrokentrust.com/episode 1. So Brad, let's give the listeners an intro so that we can kind of put it in context, what we're about to talk about.
Okay, Morgan, we are going to talk about the 7 stages of affair recovery, of working through the betrayal and trauma of infidelity. And this particular podcast is really just a bird's eye view of the process. And I think our listeners are going to be surprised at what may be holding them back as they try to recover. And so overall, our podcast is going to follow the 7 stages outline. So we're going to start with, negative cycles is going to come up in a little bit. Because really what we want overall is what's called post-traumatic growth. And that's where greater good has come out of such a horrific event as betrayal and trauma.
Okay.
And post-traumatic growth is, if you've never heard that term, that's just where you go through something terrible, you're not glad you went through it, but greater good has come out of it. Whether you choose to stay and work on your relationship or you choose to not be in the relationship, but greater good has come out of it in your life.
Okay, so what you're saying is basically the 7 stages of the recovery process. This is really a foundational episode because everything that we're going to talk about going forward is really in sort of this in context. The 7 stages are kind of the context.
Yeah, 7 stages is just the bird's eye view of the healing process, what that looks like.
Gotcha. And so why is this so important for them to listen to?
Well, here's why. Because you need a good roadmap if you're going to go do anything. If you're going to go find a new restaurant in your city and it's a fairly large town, you're going to need, and you've never been to that restaurant, you're going to need GPS, you're going to need a map to get you there. And the 7 stages of affair recovery is a really good map that's going to show you how to get there, where you need to be to begin to heal effectively.
Right, yeah.
Heal so you don't have a limp, but eventually heal where you're stronger and better than you were before. And I say that because usually the person who's been betrayed wants to only focus on the affair, and then the person who had the affair wants to deal with the relationship before the affair occurred. And so you've got to have a map that guides you through that process. And one of the advantages that we have, that we bring to the table as you listen to this, is that we work with couples every day through infidelity. We own a private practice in our city in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we're able to really help people work through that process. And sometimes there's, folks who have been betrayed, but they really come at it from only the experience of the person who's been betrayed and not from somebody who deals with this every day and help in the sense of helping people get better and stronger than they were before. And so I think we offer a lot, and I think we add a lot as individuals who work with couples to help them be stronger than they were before. And we look at both sides of the relationship and not just from the side of somebody who's been betrayed, who's talking about what happened. And sometimes when we have just that kind of advice only without kind of both sides and understanding both sides of the process, we can really end up bitter and jaded. And I'll just say this and I'll be quiet and we'll jump into our podcast. But I remember one time I read a book on infidelity that was written and I think published 18 months after this guy got done, after he was betrayed by his wife. He was either 18 months into healing as he was writing the book or when it was published. And I got to tell you that the guy in the book really lacked a lot of perspective, a lot of just, you could sense in his book just the bitterness and the anger And of course, all that's normal. You're traumatized. Your life is, you're just emotionally destroyed.
Right.
All of that's normal. But so that's something I think we offer is we kind of can help the bird's eye view what both people are experiencing in the process, and not just from the angle of the person who's been betrayed.
Yeah.
So we bring something valuable there, I think.
Yeah, kind of that bird's eye view, but then also you might be at a different stage today than you will be in a week or a month. And so kind of knowing where you are right now and where you might be later is really important to know, because the healing process will look different to, a month from now, 3 months from now, than it will even today. So we really need to know kind of where you are now, where you're going, and then that way you can really, the mystery is not there.
Yeah.
It's very clear, and it's not as scary. And so then the symptoms, the traumatic symptoms, won't be as difficult. So this, I think this episode with what we're going to talk about it can really help the healing process just that much faster, because you know where you're at.
Oh, yeah. I had a client one time who, after listening to this, said, "Oh my gosh, I realized where I got held up. I got held up in the meaning stage. I've been suffering because I haven't understood why they had the affair, why they cheated on me so many times." And she just couldn't get over it until she understood it. And that's normal for individuals. Until you understand why, it's really hard to heal completely.
Yeah, and this will really help you to target, okay, I need to focus on this part and not that part. I don't need to waste my time here at the moment. I just need to focus on this part. So then you can kind of zero in and start really focusing on the things that really matter to you at the moment.
Yeah.
And it'll give you a chance to ask your spouse for what you really need.
Yeah.
Instead of being so confused.
Yeah, and I think every stage that you're about to listen to is extremely important. I don't know if they're all equal, but they're all extremely important. Ambiguity is huge. That's just uncertainty if you want to stay or go. It's really hard to work on a relationship when you're unsure if you want to stay in it or not, or if the one who had the affair is on the fence about leaving or not. It's really hard to get any healing done. Meaning is also really important, and negative cycles are extremely important as well.
We spend a lot of time on negative cycles in this podcast. Not this particular episode, but in a future episode, we will spend quite a bit of time on it. So, so important.
Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin the podcast.
All right. Brad, talk to our listeners about how these stages work.
Okay, Morgan. Affair recovery is a process. So working through these stages is a process. And each stage must be successfully dealt with in order to heal. You can't skip a stage. Mm-hmm. With that being said, working through these stages, it may be simultaneously dealt with. So when you're dealing with one stage, you may also be simultaneously dealing with another stage as well. All we did is just put on paper what couples do to help them know that there's a roadmap to healing and a way to recover from this. And Morgan, I want to go ahead and start with the most important, all of these are important, but probably the most important stage to healing. And this stage right here is the engine that creates the change, that allows a couple to work through this affair recovery process. And that is turning the negative cycle into the positive cycle. And let me explain that. Honesty, that's vital to recovering from an affair, but it's not the greatest hindrance to healing from an affair. The negative cycle is typically the greatest hindrance to a couple recovering from an affair. Negative cycles, those are the fights and disagreements that couples experience when recovering from an affair. If you are not consciously aware of the negative cycle and what you are contributing to it, it will be difficult to avoid it. Negative cycles take different forms. They can involve arguments, or they can involve emotional distance. Couples can argue or just try to sweep things under the carpet. You know you are in a negative cycle when you and your spouse are stuck in a rut and you find it very difficult to get out of it.
Right, because you don't feel close.
You don't feel close. You're doing things to either try to make things better, and that can involve the arguing, trying to get things better, or sometimes people do something different. They just sweep things under the rug, the carpet, as a way to make things better.
Right.
And that's actually a different type of negative cycle.
It's counterproductive.
It's very counterproductive, and it keeps people distant.
And
Morgan, go ahead.
It keeps people from feeling like they can be honest. Because like you're saying, honesty is vital, but that negative cycle keeps people from feeling like they can be honest without repercussion.
Mm-hmm. Well, and here's the thing, too. You're going to hear from all kinds of sources how important honesty is, and honesty is vital.
Right.
I mean, it's. I would say that's probably the second thing you need, but people overlook the negative cycle.
Right.
Because with this negative cycle, you can't move forward. You can't move forward through the other stages. You can't reach the last stage that we're going to talk about today, post-traumatic growth. You can't really have a marriage that's stronger than it was before, that was better than it was before, more intimate and closer, if you don't deal with the negative cycle. And that negative cycle can be the fighting, or it could just be the distance, avoiding each other.
Right.
And so...
Not talking at all.
Not talking at all. And here's, Morgan, I want to say this before we go on to the next step, the next stage in the fair recovery model that we have. It's the negative cycle, how we get out of... Here, the negative cycle is the engine that creates change in the recovery process. It helps you move forward in the recovery process, and this cycle is fueled, the fuel of the change, the fuel of what creates change as you work through the negative cycle is primary emotion. And we're going to discuss that more in this fair recovery program. Basically, primary emotion is the core emotion that we experience. Things like hurt, sadness, fear, feeling unworthy. It's in sharing that and feeling that and sharing that with our spouse. That is what helps us begin to get out of the negative cycles, along with being aware of what we're contributing to it, and it helps us begin to deal with these relationship injuries.
And move into the positive cycle.
Yes, exactly. And we move into the positive cycle. Our bond is deeper with each other. We feel closer with each other. And as we share these primary emotions, we are deepening our bond with each other because we begin to share our fears of getting closer.
Right. And sharing those deep those emotions underneath the secondary emotions, that moves us out of the negative cycle and into a positive cycle, where we're able to move close to each other, like you're saying, right?
Yeah, and what couples often do is they may be feeling hurt, and they may be feeling sad and afraid and unworthy, and they may even share that kind of stuff, but it comes from a place of frustration, it comes from a place of anger, and the listener isn't able to really grasp the meaning.
Right.
And when that message, that primary core emotion of hurt, sadness, fear, feeling unworthy is shared without the frustration, without the anger, without the resentment being present, just the pure openness of that, the vulnerability even, when that's shared, the listener, the person you're sharing that to, your spouse, as you're working through this affair, when they hear that, they're going to want to be there for you. They're going to want to stop doing what they're doing that hurts you and what causes you to want to distance from them.
Right.
It's going to help you let down your guard, and it's going to help you guys both have a marriage that you haven't had before. Your marriage will be stronger, and it's going to help you deal with this huge relationship injury, this infidelity or infidelities that have occurred, and it's going to make your bond deeper. And we go into that in this affair recovery program that you have.
Right, and like you said, it's not necessarily steps, that are rigid. This cycle, this positive cycle that you're creating is going to be you're going to be doing this throughout the whole recovery process.
Yes, I'm glad you said that. You're going to be using this, and you're going to want to go ahead and listen to the negative cycle information that you have when you're done with this. And we talk about how to work through the negative cycle, more information about primary emotion. We're going to talk about secondary emotion and how to share that with each other. And you're going to want to use this throughout this whole recovery process.
Right, through each step.
Yeah, and you're going to want to continue to use this even after you guys have recovered from the affair, even when you've reached our last and seventh stage of recovery, the post-traumatic growth stage. You're going to want to continue to use that.
Right.
And so the first step in the affair recovery model that we have is turning the negative cycle into the positive cycle.
Right.
The first step or stage is that. The second stage is discovery. And this is what most people... And let me say this, Morgan, about the negative cycle is... Here's the kicker with the negative cycle. If you don't deal with the negative cycle, you are healing with the rut that you guys were in that got you into the affair.
Right.
That same basic dance, that same pattern that you guys had before, that same cycle that you had before the affair, you're healing with that.
Right.
So you have to deal with it.
Trying to heal.
But most people don't ever address that.
Right.
And in fact, I hear very little about the negative cycle.
That same pattern of criticizing, demanding, withdrawing, stonewalling cycle that you got into before the affair happened is what you're using. That's those same ways of communicating. You're using that to try to heal from the affair, and it's just not going to work. So we've got to change that.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's really important. Most people are familiar, most people think the affair recovery process starts with the moment of discovery. But for us, that's the second part of our affair recovery model.
Right.
And so the second stage is discovery. And here's one of the key things about understanding discovery. If you're listening to this, it's probably already too late. It's better if the one who had the affair, if they disclose the affair, rather than the injured spouse discovering it.
Right.
Upon impact of discovery, there's a feeling that the whole world is collapsing, that everything the betrayed spouse thought he or she knew about his or her spouse is now shattered. Betrayed spouses have just entered what is commonly experienced as shattered assumptions. They experience shattered assumptions about their spouses, themselves, the world, and even God. I had one client of mine recently describe it this way: finding out about my husband's affair, in that second I found out, I felt like my whole world was turned upside down, and everything I thought I knew about him was now wrong. The moment of impact typically involves many responses, the most common of which include shock, rage, sadness, and hurt. I had one man, upon finding out, he tore down a wall in his house upon finding out about his wife's affair. The moment of discovery sets off a fuse of reactions that are very similar to the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, which we thoroughly discuss in this audio program.
Right. So you may have already discovered the infidelity. You may have discovered it. But we talk about negative cycles as though you've already been in a negative cycle which led to the infidelity. And now you've discovered the infidelity. And like we said, it's not a necessarily linear step-by-step process. You're going to be working through these cycles. Even though you've discovered it, you're going to be working through those cycles.
Yeah. And Morgan, I do want to say this, though. Violence is never condoned. It's never acceptable for any reason, even if you've been betrayed.
Right.
Even if you walk in on your spouse with somebody else, violence is still not acceptable.
Right.
Your physical safety should be your top concern.
Right. Which is very important.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah. Okay, it doesn't give you a license to
be violent.
Exactly. And so the third stage of the affair recovery process is ambiguity. Right? It's very normal. This is where, after the affair is made known, you must decide if you want to remain in the marriage or if you want to go. Deciding to stay or go will vary for different reasons for each spouse after the affair is made known. For the spouse who was involved with someone else, it will depend on how deep their connection was with the affair partner and how burnt out in the marriage they were before the affair happened. For the betrayed spouse, it will largely depend on how honest the betrayer is after the affair has been discovered. So obviously there are many other factors that influence a couple deciding to work through the affair, which we cover in the audio program. And another thing that we mention as well, don't make any major life decisions in this beginning, the beginning of discovering the infidelity. Give yourself time, because in your pain you can make decisions that are just not the best for you going forward in your future. You may feel differently a few months from now. So give yourself time.
Morgan, I'm glad you said that, because that's really important. Something else that's really important, Morgan, is that 72% of individuals, men and women both, it's the same number, 72% choose to work on their marriage after the affair is made known.
It's very important.
And that's important because I've had many people say, is there something wrong with me for still being here?
Am I just crazy for
Am I nuts?
still wanting to be
desperate?
with them?
And, I have issues from my childhood. Is that why I'm still here with them? And I'm sharing that because it's normal to work on a marriage after an affair. There's nothing wrong with you. Doesn't mean you're codependent.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have some kind of childhood issues.
Right.
things like that, it's normal for a person to want to work on their marriage after an affair.
Right. It's more normal than giving up.
It's true. That's a good way to put it.
So as you work through your feelings of uncertainty about staying or going, you both may alternate between feeling both of these options, whether staying or going. You're going to alternate. One day you might feel like you want to stay. The next minute you'll be like, I'm getting out of here. And that is something that may occur multiple times a day, even in the coming weeks for both of you. So just know that going back and forth between wanting to stay and wanting to go is very normal in this ambiguous time of discovering the affair.
And for many couples, that can last weeks. Some couples, it lasts several months.
Right.
Where one of them is on the fence about that.
Right. And what we've noticed that keeps the spouse who had the affair in this place of ambiguity longer is when they still have contact with the affair partner. Lingering feelings about the affair partner can perpetuate the period of ambiguity and prevent the involved spouse from being emotionally invested back into the marriage. So when that happens, it's obviously very hard to rebuild the marriage and to bring new life into the relationship. So, that's important. Cutting off the affair is very important.
That is huge, Morgan.
Yeah.
It's really huge.
Right.
The third step in our affair recovery model is trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And trauma basically means a deep emotional wound. And trauma, in virtually every couple I've worked with, the betrayed spouse had several symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And I do want to say this, so I'm not everyone that I've worked with has had symptoms of PTSD, but the overwhelming majority have.
Mm-hmm.
Also, please note that I'm not diagnosing you with that if you've been betrayed. I'm not diagnosing you with post-traumatic stress disorder just by listening to this audio program.
Right.
Generally, once a couple starts working on the affair, the first 3 months will be when the emotional pain is at its most intense. If working on the affair is delayed or halted completely, the feelings of pain and resentment will still be there until they are addressed.
And that's why we talk about not making major life decisions in this first part of discovery, because your pain is so intense. You don't want to make life decisions that will really change the direction of your life at this part of the recovery process.
Yeah, and that's true. I do want to mention this. The dishonesty will keep people stuck in the emotional pain more. Emotional trauma more. So being honest with each other, both of you being honest, is very important. Also, the negative cycle keeps people stuck, because one of the things that you need to heal is you heal in each other's arms. You need that emotional closeness and connection to work through this. The negative cycle prevents that from happening because you're stuck in a rut. You can't reach each other. And that keeps people stuck in trauma longer. For our listeners, it's also worth knowing that sometimes your friends, family members, and unfortunately mental health professionals who don't realize how trauma works will offer horrible advice, such as, you have to let this pain go to begin to heal the marriage. You need to put this in a box and give it to God. You need to quit asking about the affair and focus on rebuilding the marriage.
These are things we've heard people
these are direct quotes. Talking about the affair only makes it worse. All of these reactions and other reactions, those are dismissive of the pain, simply making it worse for couples to heal together.
Right, because it's trauma. You have to work through the trauma and work through the pain to really find healing.
Yeah. And you may be listening to our audio program because you've had a bad experience with a counselor who wasn't properly trained on how to help couples recover from an affair. For about 30% of my practice, I am the second or third, sometimes fourth or more marriage counselor that couple has worked with. To heal the trauma, there are definite things that can be done to help recover from the trauma, from the pain of the affair, and we're going to get into more of that with this audio program.
So that's very, very important to know. And actually, the fact that we are the third and fourth therapist that they come to is amazing. Sometimes it's a miracle.
Well, persistence. Thank God for their persistence.
Absolutely. Stay persistent.
Yeah.
Don't give up, because there is healing. Okay, so the next stage in the recovery process is meaning. This step involves talking about the affair, contrary to some opinion, you do need to talk about the affair. The point of talking about the affair is really to make the betrayed spouse feel safe and help them understand why the affair occurred. The betrayed spouse must comprehend what happened and why. Couples have my permission, or our permission, to talk about everything except for the off-limit topics which we discuss later in our affair recovery program. It can be re-traumatizing for a person to know physical details about the affair and to witness written documentation of the feelings and emotions involved in the affair, like emails. Typically, the partners who had the affair want to suppress information because they're trying to protect their partner and maybe themselves. But the reality is they need to know so that they can stop obsessing, visualizing, and imagining about the situation, filling in the blanks of all the things they don't know that can cause a lot of more trauma. So something that is absolutely crucial to help injured spouses accept and understand the why is that they must feel the betrayer is working very hard to earn their trust. They need to sense that the betrayer cares immensely and is in pain because the injured spouse is hurting. If the injured spouse does not feel cared for by the spouse who had the affair, he or she will have a hard time accepting much from the involved spouse, and an even harder time accepting anything further. So it's really important to feel like they're really trying in this process.
Morgan, that's important. The other thing is some people have a deeper need to know why than others. And so some of you listening are going to say, well, I don't have that much of a need to know
The details.
the details. I kind of get it. I understand. You're going to do much better than those who have to know every single detail. And it's not for me to say you can't. I'm going to tell you there's certain, like Morgan just said, there's certain things you don't want to know. We're going to get into more of that in the Fair Recovery Program. But there are definite things that are there that some people need to know.
Right.
And
that's okay.
And that's okay. If that's you, though, if you're a couple if you're the individual who's been betrayed and you have a deeper need to know why this happened, this may be a longer process for you.
Right.
But here's the temptation, though. When people get into that, there's a temptation to get away from focusing on the negative cycle. They take their focus off the negative cycle onto the scavenger hunt for why did this happen,
Right.
and their whole life becomes about that. And it's really painful for me as a therapist to see people whose whole life becomes consumed with this affair and understanding why it happened and talking about it only. And so there's a delicate balance here, and it's for you as an individual to know what that is. And I would say you want to favor working on the negative cycle and dealing with that, because so many times when people get caught up in the why and not knowing why, they're also caught in the negative cycle.
Right.
And if you can redirect your focus onto the negative cycle and sharing those primary emotions, that will help you get unplugged with the why. And listen to the information that we have on finding why this happened. That can help you unplug this.
Right, and so that's very important. So let's move on to the next stage.
Forgiveness, and we'll be done here shortly. The next step in this fair recovery process that we've developed is forgiveness. And there's two types of forgiveness. The first type of forgiveness is important because it means letting go of all the bitterness and resentment that comes from being betrayed. That's huge.
It is.
The second type of forgiveness is also important because it allows the betrayed spouse to put his or her guard aside, allows them not to be guarded with the one who betrayed them, and it allows them to let that person back into their heart and their emotional world, allows them to be vulnerable with them. Until forgiveness happens, an injured spouse may remain cold and distant. And in this program, for both types of forgiveness, we will walk you through the process of forgiveness, not the one-time event of forgiveness. And many times people say, well, I've forgiven you.
Right.
Yeah,
or you've forgiven me. Why do you keep bringing this up?
Yeah, but it's a process.
Right.
And that's really important to know that.
Yeah, the fact that you're even here trying shows that you're beginning the process of forgiveness.
It's already started.
Right.
Someone once said, forgiveness is easy until you have someone to forgive.
Right.
Forgiveness cannot really take place until the injured spouse feels like the affair is over and the pain is stopped. You can't let somebody back in until you feel like the affair is over.
Right. And it's safe to open up again.
Yeah, and it's safe to open up again. The spouse who is involved in the affair, they've become a source of healing, and the injured spouse believes it won't happen again. And we're going to discuss what forgiveness is and isn't, and what is needed for forgiveness to happen more in this audio program.
Right, which is very, very important. It's a very important stage. The next stage is about post-traumatic growth, and this would be the final stage. Once again, this is not a linear process. Not every step is consecutive.
And Morgan, this is what we're working for.
Right.
This is what we're building towards.
We're building towards post-traumatic growth. And growth happens when we experience pain and loss. I mean, we just naturally will grow during that. Growth is something to strive for, even though not every couple achieves it. And it doesn't matter where you are in the process. You can get there. Not every couple who experiences infidelity achieves growth because it is a process, and this process requires time and resilience. And some couples just give up too soon, which we don't like seeing. Now, there are 5 general areas of post-traumatic growth. Change in outside relationships, experiencing closer relationships with others. A part of this could be an increase in connection to others who suffer. This also means a deeper connection with your spouse. The marriage is better than it was before in this first general area of post-traumatic growth. The second is deepening one's relationship with God. Sometimes when someone experiences a deepening in their spiritual life, this means a change in their belief system, right? So they're growing. Third, increased sense in one's own abilities and strengths to overcome future obstacles. Commonly, people who've experienced post-traumatic growth will say, if I live through that, I can handle anything, right? It's resilience.
There's a new, like you mentioned, just a new confidence that's there.
Yeah. The fourth is greater appreciation for life in general. And the fifth, an awareness that life is not over, and indeed there are new opportunities or possibilities that life has in store for you. So, post-traumatic growth.
And Morgan, that's important because this post-traumatic growth isn't just for the one who's been betrayed. It's for the one who had the affair. It's for both of you as individuals, and it's for your marriage. Experiencing post-traumatic growth doesn't mean you'll never lose the scars from the affair. It just means your life has been profoundly better because it happened. And that's important. Your life has been profoundly better because this happened to you. And that's what this audio program is designed to do, is to help you get to that place.
Right, where your relationship is better than it ever has before.
And you're a better person, and your life is better because this happened.
Absolutely.
That is possible no matter where you're at in this process. I just want to say this because we're going to be done in a second. I had a couple I worked with for several weeks, and I'm usually very optimistic working with a couple, but this particular couple, I was thinking, if we don't have a profound change happen in the next little bit here, you know, they're going to be done with counseling and they're going to be done with each other. And we ended up getting that. And now they are fantastic. And this is a couple that had me even worried about their progress. And I'm super optimistic when working with couples that they can make it work, work through this. And this was one that had me thinking, oh man, this couple's in trouble. And what I'm trying to say is this: no matter where you're at in this process, and this was a guy that had lied to his wife numerous times and had more than one affair, had multiple affairs, and I was their second counselor. They didn't get anywhere else with their first counselor. You can make it. You can do this. And so no matter where you're at, you guys can turn this around. You can reach post-traumatic growth and have a better marriage and be a better person than you were before.
No matter how bad you feel about it, no matter how desperate the situation seems, you can turn this around. You're showing up, you're trying, you're doing your very best. There is hope.
Yep.
So with that, have a wonderful week. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to Healing Broken Trust. If you like this episode, you can always get our show notes and more details and links to the resources we discussed at healingbrokentrust.com. Also, as long as you're online, head on over to healingbrokentrust.com/retreat for details on an upcoming one-on-one retreat with me. If you like us, please subscribe and leave a review for us on iTunes. As always, everything discussed on this podcast is either my opinion or Morgan's opinion and is not to be taken as relationship advice because I'm not your therapist, nor have I considered your personal situation as your therapist. This podcast is for your entertainment and education only, and I really do hope you've enjoyed it. See you until next time.